निरञ्जनं नित्यं अनन्तरूपं भक्तानुकम्पाधृतविग्रहं वै ईशावतारं परमेशमीड्यं तं रामकृष्णं शिरसा नमामि. Namaste and welcome to our Sunday talk in the series Mind Management Techniques. In the last 2 or 3 sessions, we have been discussing a very important subject related to the actual practical part of the management of the mind. Before that, this was the knowledge part, the theory part of it. We're sort of trying to get into the sadhana part of it. And just to put in context this particular topic for today, which is sort of trying to understand the mechanism as to how we become attached to things of this world, which is a problem that all of us suffer from. And once that knowledge, and when we have a deep understanding of that knowledge, you'll find that you yourself will have a means to go beyond this attachment through the practice of detachment. So to put in context, when great spiritual teachers come, they tell us that we as human beings are not only a physical body, behind and finer than this physical body is a mental body, and even beyond that is a body of knowledge or intelligence, and beyond that is something which is unlimited pure consciousness, which is called the Atman at a microcosmic or individual level. And likewise, at the macrocosmic level, beyond this physical material world, there is a mental world, which is called the Mahat or the Hiranyagarbha in the Vedanta language. And beyond that is a cosmic being, a cosmic essence, intelligence, which is called the Ishwara. And beyond that is the universal consciousness called Brahman. Having said that, they say that it is possible for human being to go beyond this everyday normal experience of ourselves as an individual attached to a body-mind entity and access a level of consciousness which is what is called the Atman. And they describe out of their own experience the nature of this Atman. It's infinite existence, infinite knowledge, infinite bliss, infinite peace, infinite everything that is wonderful is really having its source in that Atman. That is our true eternal nature, the permanent nature, the Sat, unchanging. Anything other than that is in the realm of Prakriti, relative world, in time, space, and causation. Right from this loka, the plane of physical plane, up to Brahma loka, the 7 planes of consciousness are differentiations. Prakriti means that which is differentiated. The Brahmaloka is the finest and the subtlest, and it becomes grosser and grosser and grosser until it comes down to this physical world here, in which our body exists, so to say. And so they say it is possible to lift our mind or level of consciousness to access these higher realms of consciousness, where we can experience that infinite peace and bliss and our eternal immortal nature here and now, so to say. But when we try to do that, we find that our mind does not cooperate. It is stuck at this level. We struggle so hard. And in spite of our best efforts, we are caught or stuck or glued to this. We said we are stuck to these attachments. And all the scriptures teach us that we should free ourselves from these attachments by practicing non-attachment. That's Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and all this. The essence is there. We are told what we should do. You should practice non-attachment. But the actual mechanism by which this attachment is, how we are super glued to this world, if we do not know how that gluing is happening, then we do not know the means of decoupling or disconnecting or disengaging this world. So after talking about this wonderful Atman Brahman nature, as Sri Ramakrishna would do, so you put yourself in the situation in Dakshineshwar, where devotees have come and sitting in front of Sri Ramakrishna, and they can see him repeatedly going into samadhi and having this blissful experience, and so they are totally convinced that there is some entity beyond, and it's a wonderful state to be in. So they ask this question, so what is the way for me to have access to that also? And we are talking in the last 3-4 classes about the 3 instructions or 4 instructions that Sri Ramakrishna gives as some things to practice. In this series of talks, we are trying to understand, go deeper into the science of it. Okay, he says you practice, but how does that, the science of it works, the inner mental mechanism, so to say. So, and Sri Ramakrishna would say, first of all, you should now and then go into solitude. We discussed about what we should do when we go into solitude. In the second thing, he talks about that we should seek spiritual company, holy company. Now, what's the big deal about that? How does it really help us in our spiritual pursuit? In the last 2 classes, we're trying to discuss a little bit more on that, and we use the some knowledge from the science, like how the mind is what it is, made of samskaras and vasanas, and how those good samskaras can be reoriented in the spiritual direction. So we use the example of a magnet and its magnetic dipoles, and when it comes in the influence of another magnet, then the magnetic field of the bigger magnet can help align the magnetic dipoles of the new metal piece, and therefore it can discover and feel its own inherent magnetism, so to say. That was sort of a little bit of a static type of idea, not a very high level understanding, but gives you some insight about how we are constituted within. And in the last class, I tried to take that a little further using another concept out of science, where we say it's not simply, the mind is not simply a static thing like a hard disk of a computer. No, the computer is on and the data is being processed and information is flowing. It's a dynamic thing. So we try to understand a little bit on that. Today, I'll take that idea a little further, because I feel that if we can understand ourselves, our minds in that way, then you'll be able to see how in so many ways the mind is connected to this world through so many means. It could be some very fine strings, it could be some very thick ropes, it could be some heavy chains. All these things are anchoring us to this level of the world. And when we try to lift our mind to another level through our sadhana, through a japa and meditation, it's like when we do sadhana means we do tapasya. Tapasya means we generate heat. I use the example of a hot air balloon. You put the gas on, the balloon inflates, it wants to rise up to a high altitude, but it's not rising. Why? Look down, you see so many things are anchoring it down. So unless you disconnect that, that's why non-attachment is to be practiced. But if you do not know how the knots are tied, then you do not know how to untie them also. So today we are going to see how is the mechanism by which our mind is sort of coupled, engaged, entangled with this world, where the stickiness comes through. And having understood that, then maybe we can understand how we can decouple them, disengage the gear, so to say, and separate ourselves. Otherwise, it will keep us anchored on this orbit on the ground level, so to say. So in the static model, we talked about the mind. We said the mind is the middle dimension. And the main difference between people and people is in their mental makeup. Physically, we are more or less same. Atman, we are identical. In between comes the mind. Everything in nature, according to Vedanta and Sankhya, is made out of 3 substances called tamas, rajas, and sattva. Tamas means too much inertia, darkness, immovable, doesn't want to change itself. Tamasic people. An example of a tamasic animal is like a buffalo. You can't hurry it, so to say. Rajas means too many desires and passions, always agitated, wanting this, never happy type of things. It colors the mind, or conditions it, agitates it. And the fine balance of everything is this sattvic mind, the transparent mind. So if a tinted glass is like a tamasic, example of a tamasic mind, when the light on the other side is not able to penetrate much through, a rajasic mind is like a colored glass, green or red, with a white light coming from that side becomes colored by the medium through which it passes. So a Rajasic mind tempers, the conditioning of the mind influences how we perceive the world, so to say. And a sattvic mind is a very pure mind where it's like a transparent glass where the whatever is kept inside is seen as it is. So our spiritual sadhana is focused not in creating the Atman or bringing the Atman. You are the Atman all the time. In between, this intervening layer of the mind is what is preventing us from having that experience. And our focus is, in all spiritual sadhana, is Chitta Shuddhi, purification of this mind. Blessed are the pure in heart, pure in mind. So it's very important to understand what is this mind, how it functions, how it is entangled at this material level, and having understood that science, because knowledge is power, that knowledge will help us free ourselves from this. So, in the last class talk, we discussed this example of resonance. So, the mind is, or anything in this creation is in the realm of Shakti, power, energy. At the higher frequencies, that energy is vibrating, pulsating at a higher frequency, higher planes of consciousness. As it comes down and becomes more and more grossified, so to say, or materialized, so to say, the planes of vibrations become lower and lower and lower. And so we say, just like a solid piece of ice is also made out of water molecules, but they are not vibrating so fast because the temperature is low. If you inject some energy heat into it, they begin to vibrate faster and faster. At some point, they will disconnect themselves from that rigid form and take the form of the vessel in which it's kept. They have got more freedom to move around now. So as more energy is given to them, greater freedom they get. And at some point, you keep on heating that, it begins to evaporate. So water molecules now free themselves from the constraint and bondage of that particular vessel, and they're flying all over the place. You can't see them, but they're there. Likewise, these planes of consciousness, what we call material, matter, is something, whatever it is, but it's vibrating at a very low frequency. When the same substance vibrates at a higher frequency, we call it the mind. When so mind would be like in the equivalent would be your water level, so to say. And again, when it vibrates at a higher level, we'll call it intelligence. Beyond that, it sort of goes beyond the mind itself, and the mind cannot define it. It is there, but it's not experienced, so to say. So let's say science, in the modern science, says that everything in this world is made of Shakti, vibration, spandana. There's a whole science of it called Spanda Shastras or Spanda Karya. Spanda means that which is vibrating. Now, if you look at it from the science point of view, a subatomic particle, a quark, vibrates at a very high frequency. Science tells it's at something like 10 to the power 22. When it becomes little solidified, bigger, then it becomes a subatomic particle like a neutron and a proton. That is something, I think, around like 10 to the 15 hertz. So as it vibrates, its vibrations becomes less and less, it becomes more materialized, so to say. It takes a shape of a particle, it becomes matter, it has got mass, and all those type of things come. But let's keep on defining it in terms of frequencies. When a neutron and a proton try to stay together because they think that would be a more stable part of it, so they form a nucleus, the frequency comes down, and they entangle themselves with an electron, and suddenly you have got a hydrogen atom or helium atom. Then two hydrogen atoms might decide that it's better if they remain coupled together. That's more stable. So it's a hydrogen molecule. Maybe they get hold of an oxygen together and say, we three of are even better. And it becomes a water molecule. But as they become more and more grossified, the frequency level keeps on coming down. And at some point, it sort of materializes in front of us. In the water vapor, we can't see. But when it condenses as a water droplet, we say, I can see that. Now, that is because of the limitation of our sense organs to perceive some higher frequencies. Only when it comes within that particular realm, in the visible spectrum, then we can say, I can see, or we can sense it. But whether we see or not, all this vibrations in the electromagnetic spectrum, whether it's gamma rays, X-rays, microwaves, all those things are there. When our own sense organs are not so powerful to detect them directly, we as mankind have used that knowledge to develop science and knowledge of science and technology to strengthen or extrapolate or enhance the power of the senses, a microscope or telescope or whatever is there, to be able to detect those higher frequencies. An X-ray, all this type of MRIs and all these things are different devices by which we are able to understand them, manipulate them, devise equipment, and utilize them in ourselves. But whether we know or not, they are all there. That is all part of nature, right from the highest, finest level of vibrations to the gross material world out of which our physical body is made. The important thing to understand that everything is vibrating, and if it's vibrating, it has got what it's called its own natural frequency. In science, we have got this Max Planck's law. He says everything is vibrating at a particular frequency, natural frequency. The vibration frequency of this planet Earth is around 7 hertz, so to say. So that is an important idea. What we would call a natural frequency is maybe in your Vedanta language would be like your swabhava, your nature. That means that is where you are vibrating or staying, that's your stable, balanced condition. So let's use this idea of that the mind itself is an energy and matter that's vibrating. It's not a static piece of information or a magnetic dipole in a magnet, but it is something vibrating, pulsating. How do we visualize that? So if you look at a magnetic field around a magnet, what does it look like? Okay, so you might say, you have seen in your textbooks, there's a rectangular piece magnet and you have got these lines of force around it. That's because somebody put a piece of paper and sprinkled some iron filings and those lines showed up there. But if I said, look, if you took this piece of metal out in space where there's no gravity and you threw some iron filings around it, how would they arrange themselves? Well, they said, okay, would there be lines like that, or there will be spheres around that, all around? So really, there is something, this magnetic field, which is enveloping around, something like you might say the magnetic field around this earth. If you try to visualize, it's not like in one sheet, it's all over, all around it in a shape of a torus, goes inside and out from all that. Now that is like a static field. Visualize that is a vibrating dynamic field, which would mean an electromagnetic wave, which is expanding and collapsing and collapsing and expanding like that. So our mind, try to visualize, is a whole collection of such fields inside. Ideas, thoughts, emotions are pulsating, resonating vibrations of energy. Okay? Oscillating, pulsating ideas, because they're active things. They're making you do things. So if they are like in your mind, if you can visualize that this is a pulsating vibration, and when you have plenty of them around there, they will tend to coalesce together, just like protons and neutrons come together and hydrogen atoms come together, whatever. They all build up and enhance each other's field, and ultimately you get a big magnet, the mind of that particular person, constituted of all those so many subtle components, which are our ideas, our thoughts, our likes, our dislikes, our experience. So it's a very complex thing. It's normally called such a thing where a lot of components are entangled together in a homogeneous way to make an entity is called a system. Around that is called a boundary. Outside that is what's called the environment. And so how does this mind exist in this whole sort of a cosmic system? We are a mind, and you have another mind, and a third person has another mind, and all these minds are like different whirlpools in the river of the mind, the cosmic mind, so to say. We are connected through that. A river is there, is flowing, water is flowing, but now and then we see a whirlpool, another whirlpool, third whirlpool. They all might join together and make a massive whirlpool also, and have build upon that power. So you'll find that 2 or 3 people who are like-minded, we say, get together and they form a group, and suddenly the power of that group is enhanced. It could be a football team, it could be a religious group, it could be a political group. But when many minds, like-minded, come together and contribute their whole component, the force of that entity, which might be a community or team or organization, and becomes very, very powerful. So we contribute to that, and it also, it we give something to it, and the system gives to us. In that, so today I would like to go deeper into this. How do we understand this? Because everywhere you'll find we are not living in an isolated space. We're living in a very complex system, constantly acting on that, and they are acting on us. And this acting and reacting on us binds and entangles and couples there. And when we try to get out of it, say, I want to practice non attachment and lift my mind to another level, you find that these things pull us down, so to say, anchors. Let us look at that, because and then you try to understand how you are conditioned and placed and entangled, whether it's a family or community or um, country or humanity or whatever is there. In so many ways, at so many levels, we are connected. And unless we find a means of disconnecting this, it's almost impossible to extricate ourselves. In the light of this, you'll understand why Sri Ramakrishna says, now and then you must go to solitude, why you must go and find a group of people whose minds are vibrating at a higher place, or on a higher ideal, a spiritual group, so that they can help you lift your mind up. And how, why he's saying, repeat the mantra. What is the big deal about that? If you understand this mechanism of it, you'll find that all these means are very scientific instructions, not some dogmatic instructions, just simply do it. There's a whole science behind it. They understood it, but maybe they just gave the instructions. We can use our science knowledge to understand deeper. So imagine anything is vibrating. If something is vibrating in a particular way, we call it a harmonic movement. A pendulum is an example of a simple harmonic movement. So what happens? Why does it swing like this in that way? Because that is a very efficient way for the pendulum to conserve its energy. It changes it from the potential energy to kinetic energy, and then swings it back around. And in that way, it swings. And it will have its own particular natural frequency. Frequency means how many swings per second, so to say, or how many swings per minute you want to say. So if you are making a pendulum swing, when do you give it a push? Not in the middle of it. Just when it is at the end, you give a little push, and you'll see that with a little bit of energy, it is able to maintain that flow. I also gave the example of if there are multiple pendulums. So imagine your mind is a pendulum swinging in some particular rhythm nicely. You go to a group of people, and they're a group because they are happy with themselves. So if such 5 people or 6 people come, what happens? How do you form a group that you're all happy with each other? We are on the same page, birds of a feather flock together, we are comfortable with each other, we like to seek each other's company. How have you become entangled in a comfortable group, so to say? It happens. It could be a family, it could be a group of friends who go to a picnic or party or pub, whatever. Somehow that group has a tendency to pull you in and hold you in there, isn't it? And you feel attracted, I should go and be part of them again. Where is that pull coming from? We say we're attached to it, we like it, we just enjoy that company, all these different languages we use. Technically, from a science way, some way we are connected to that group, and that group is exerting an influence on me even from a distance. So let's use this example of a pendulum. If there are 6 pendulums swinging, mounted on the wall of the same length, and you make them swing around at all, not in harmony, just in a random way, and you look at them, all of them are going all over the place. You leave them and you come back after 2 days. What do you see? They are not all over the place anymore. All of them are swinging together. Okay, how did that happen? They were not connected in any way. There was no one talking to them, but some communication must have happened. Otherwise, they will not know how we should sing together. The science says that when they are moving in this way, the movement of that pendulum disturbs the air that's around there. Very fine, you can't even feel it, and it's all enclosed in that box also. That is not really going to touch. But other pendulums are able to feel that, and when they feel the disturbance around, they understand we are not together, and this is like chaotic, so to say. This is not the best way to be. Ideal would be if we are all in harmony. Harmony means this is the most efficient system, sustainable way to economize on the energy. So they push each other in some way, and they hit what is called a common frequency. When you come back together, we say they are all together. Such a system, now they have formed what is called a system. And what is the characteristic of such a system? It's rhythm entrained, rhythm entrainment. They have got a rhythm and they have been entrained into it, so to say. Initially, they were slightly different, but now they have one idea. So, for example, you join an organization, looking for a job, go to a company, and what do you find? All different types of people are there, different types of behavior and pattern and values, maybe the ethos of that company. Certain things really don't gel with you. You feel you're sort of out of sorts in that place. You hang around there for a while because you need the job. And you see what? After 2 months, 3 months, it doesn't disturb you so much. You're quite comfortable with it. You have settled in, as you say. And before you know, you are doing the same thing that those people were doing, and you don't have any qualms about it now. What happened in there? You were like, so this group and organization was like a group of pendulums, an organization in a rhythm, doing things in here. You came up from outside, vibrating at a slightly different frequency. There was a difference, and you are not settled in. You stuck around together, and what has happened? You have become entrained into it, and you say, now I'm perfectly at home with this, I'm settled in, I'm comfortable and all that. So in this pendulum, if there are 6 pendulums like that, you bring a 7th pendulum. 6 of them are oscillating at a particular natural system frequency, so to say. You bring the 7th one and make it swinging around at an odd frequency. And you watch. It doesn't take it 2 days to get entrained. Within a couple of hours, that fellow has now joined this. Such is the power of that group. So the stronger the system, the faster it will draw an independent entity. It has to be little close into itself, and you will see that. So now 7 pendulums are swinging like this. All right, all are in happy, one good organization. Birds of a feather flock together. You'll see all that in nature also there. Last time I mentioned how if you in a night you take some fireflies out in the bush and you let them go, jugno, they're shining, and you'll see they're all blinking in all random off the beat, so to say. You leave them for a while together, and after some time you see all of them are lighting up and going off simultaneously. Somehow they have communicated that it is better and more efficient for all of them to be in rhythm. And that's why you'll see birds go in flocks in the ocean. You'll see fish are going there. So many systems are there. Even our earth system, the solar system we call it, an ecosystem we call it. That means all the components somehow have found and tuned themselves to the rhythm of the system, and now they support it and contribute to it, and the system also nourishes them and provides for them. So like this, try to think how in so many ways, and this is the exercise you can do for yourself, in so many ways our minds are entrained to other individuals. Okay, 2 people met, a neutron and a proton, a husband and a wife. In the beginning, okay, they have different tastes and this and that. After some time, you are just like, totally comfortable with each other. Okay, then or you go to another family and there are other people out there, their behavior, culture and all those things. For a while, you find little different, difficult or just, but after some time, you're totally one with it, and doing the same things you probably in the beginning didn't like, but now you have become part of the system. It doesn't, why? We have become entrained with it. You go to an organization, you go to a community, you go to a religious group where people believe in a particular ideology. Advaita or Christianity or Hinduism, or sometimes it could be something totally out of the way. In the beginning, it is maybe slightly off the beat, so to say. You stick around long enough, you have become one of them. It helps you understand why people do crazy things sometimes in groups like that. For example, a political party with having extreme ideology, or we have got these types of people who do things like, cause so much violence in things. You would say, no one in their proper minds, they're all educated people in this and that. How did they join that group? Whether it was some conspiracy theorist or some suicide bombers or whatever is there, if you don't understand the whole thing in a very depth, then we'll have a very superficial knowledge and no understanding of it. It's not that that person deliberately wanted to become like that, but he somehow chanced about some association, maybe on the internet or some conversation. Something inside him resonated and it pulled him, and before he knew, just like the seventh pendulum, now he's resonating totally. Now it's not simply resonating, now you are under the control of that system. That is the important thing. You are being controlled by the system and its beck and call. And if you try to disentangle yourself from that system, the system will pull you back. So, 7 pendulums are swinging. You are the latest incomer, joined it. After some time, you understand, this is not very good. I would like to get out of here. You try to break out of that rhythm. And what happens? It will pull you back again. So, if we try to understand our own minds, in so many ways we are entangled with it. We'll call that entanglement. We are coupled with systems. We are engaged with it. We are attached to it. That is why we are locked in this human mental plane, which is conditioned by the society, people around us, ideologies, and all those things. And there comes somebody who says, my friend, this is not the highest state of human life. Okay, there's so much stress and tension and worry. You're totally at the mercy, slave to the system, so to say. It is controlled. You want to break free because that freedom is somehow built in us. But when it tries to do so, then you see the system will pull it back. How does it pull it? No, this is your duty, this is your responsibility. These are all these types are couplings, so to say, that hold us back. And through that emotional link is my love and affection, my affiliation, and my responsibility to the system, so to say, because it has been giving to me for so long, and how can I simply live back? You see, these are these mental chains, very fine chains sometimes, which will prevent you or restrict you or restrain you or prevent you from breaking out of the system. So here comes Sri Ramakrishna, who says that, look, my friend, living at this mental level is not the highest existence. There is something beyond that, a pure existence called the Atman. And you say, how do I disentangle myself from this state of mind, so to say, of consciousness, and have access to that higher? So a high level of consciousness. And he gives 3 examples, so 3 means. Now you'll find that it makes sense when he says, go into solitude. What he's saying that, or he says, this disease of worldliness has become very chronic. One must go into solitude repeatedly to cure ourselves of that. So you try to understand it in the scientific language we're trying to say. To put it in that language, to express it in that way, we will say, we are so deeply entangled with the system, our minds are that you have to forcefully break out of the system, out of the influence of the system, because if you stay within the system, it will drag you out. You have to get out of it. And then maybe you can hit that higher frequency for a while. So you'll go to a quiet place, no communication with this, no phone, no talking to that. And in that, you try to resonate with that higher ideology that you are trying to pursue. The idea of self-realization, God realization, you're doing japa or meditation or something, trying to lift your mind, but no longer being dragged down by the system anymore. The system could be a family, could be a job, it could be the community that is there, constantly demanding on you, listen to me, talk to me, do this for me. And if you are within that influence, you'll feel that constant pull. So it makes sense when Sri Ramakrishna says that one must go out into solitude. How long he says? He says, look, ideally 1 month, it takes a little bit of time to disentangle yourself really. 1 week, 3 days is also good, even for 1 day. Now it makes a logical sense. And if you've understood this and say, I'm practicing all this Japan meditation at my home in my little corner and things, but I'm not making much move, nothing much is happening. The influence of the environment that you are in is so great that any little effort you're trying to make up, it pulls you down. Sri Ramakrishna teaches us in the another little story of the mongoose. So in his village in Kamarpukur, he saw all these little things and he's using those stories to teach us. There was an old tree with a little hole somewhere halfway in the stump of the tree. And one mongoose decided to make that his house. So at night it will climb into that and snug there and sleep there. Some naughty children in the village one day caught hold of that mongoose and tied a little string to its tail, and at the other end they tied a little piece of stone or something there, and let the mongoose run around with the stone tied to its tail. Come evening, the mongoose climbs into the hole and he finds that the stone is hanging from the tail. Just when it tries to make itself comfortable, gradually the pull of the stone brings him out of the hole. Then it scrambles in, goes in there, and again gets pulled out. So likewise, this upper hole is the place we want to go, where there's peace and safety. Our mind, we're trying to raise there. Okay, as a sadhaka and go there. But we have got this stone of this worldliness and attachments tied to our tail, so to say. And as soon as we want to become comfortable in our meditation, you'll find some thought will come and I have to go there, I have a responsibility to do this and all that. And before you know, you are pulled out of that. So Sri Ramakrishna says, first you have to cut the stones tied to our tail. Only then it will allow you to go in there. In other words, how do we mentally disentangle ourselves or disconnect ourselves? And in the scientific, we have tried to understand how the mind, which is a pulsating field of energy, gets entangled to an energy field which is represented by people. Outside we are seeing physical forms and things, but if you could visualize people as not as material physical entities, is a pulsating field of ideas constantly expanding and collapsing like that. And each field is interacting with other. 5 of them come together and you form a group, and that's your group if you're comfortable. If your mind is at a lower level, these people will lift you up. You feel good about it. But if you try to go up, they will pull you down. And that's when you can't free yourself. So you might want to say, I have to break free, break loose. What does it mean? Here we get some insight into the idea of how this attachment or entanglement, this word entrainment is very good because you are different, slightly there, it has pulled you and made you a part of it. Now it is refusing to let you go out of it. And all these emotional attachments are different words that we use to define these linkages that are there. So his second teaching is that one must seek spiritual company. Now, what's the science of it? A spiritual company would be a group of people who have dedicated their pursuit or goal of life in the spiritual seeking. So they practice their spiritual disciplines and they formed their own system where they're resonating with spiritual ideas. That's what they talk, what they discuss, they sing, and they practice and all those things. And that's beyond the lower material ideas of enjoyments and pleasures and all those type of things. That is also pleasure, but a refined, higher type of pleasure, inner pleasure, not the gross physical pleasure. So Sri Ramakrishna says that could be a means for you to disentangle from this lower level and hit a next level. And he says, seek satsang, spiritual company. So what happens is, by force, you have taken yourself out of this influence of what is holding you back, and you go to an ashrama or some place where such people are there. You try to follow their routine, get up in the morning for japa and meditation. In the day, there's study of scriptures, some bhajan, some chanting, you do your yoga. Whatever you do, the subject matter is spiritual topics being there. What is happening? You have exposed yourself to the influence of that spiritual higher frequency, so to say. And what happens? You'll find that if you try to do that on your own, it's much more difficult, but the combined energy of that group will draw you and make you swing according to that higher frequency. So that's a great help. Okay, and that's why people would go to a place, a tirtha. A tirtha is a place which has become sanctified by the spiritual practices of thousands of people who have been worshipping in that place forever, or some great saint had done intense amount of spiritual tapasya, that the vibrations of that place are pulsating at a higher frequency, so to say. So you go to Vrindavan or Kashi or Jairambati or Kamarpukur or all those type of things, and you'll find that the natural vibration of that place will help you lift your mind up. We hear some cases where in the Gospel of Holy Mother, some young man goes to Mother and say, Mother, can you please initiate me? Mother says, stay here for 3 days. Okay, then I'll do that. So why would she say, wait, stay here for 3 days? Think about it. What magic is going to happen? No, the very sanctity and purity of that particular place will lift the mind of that person who has come to a higher plane which makes him more receptive to the mantra or the initiation which she wants to give. Such is the power of spiritual association. And Sri Ramakrishna would say, the disease of this worldliness has become very, very chronic. You must now and then go into solitude and seek spiritual company. In that particular place, when you go there, like sometimes you enter in a temple or something, immediately your whole world, job, family, everything is forgotten, and you just simply just like from a hot hot area, you enter into an air conditioned area, and suddenly you feel so it's nice and cool. We have heard so many times people, the moment they step into their temple, it says how peaceful it is there. There's nothing happening there, but the very vibration of that place is so soothing and calming and healing and pacifies and calms the mind. Calms the mind means it lifts it to the higher level. These lava vibrations are not able to touch you anymore, basically. If you come down there, they'll jump on your shoulders. But for the moment, the very atmosphere of that place lifts you up. You can take advantage of that atmosphere, and in that particular place do your own spiritual practices so that you can maintain that for a longer time, or when you go down it doesn't go down totally, so to say. That is the whole idea where people go in some places of pilgrimage. Just like when to go to Kashi, for a while you'll go around and see all the temples and all those type of things. It's more of a spiritual tourism, we might say. But at some point, you have seen enough, you should find a small corner, close your eyes and say, let me feel that energy, that vibration. Let me vibrate and pulsate with it. Let me feel that flow of that energy and see how that energy can lift your mind up there. That's where, when you go to a spiritual place, you should not have too much conversation, too much all the sightseeing and all this. You should find a small corner and try to shut off the outside world and feel that rhythm of your internal energy resonating with the energy of the outside place. Draw in, soak it in. So when you leave that place, you have collected some energy which will keep you lifted, buoyed up, so to say. So the second teaching was seek spiritual company, because a spiritual company is a system of people or minds which are vibrating at a higher spiritual plane, and being in that influence, that field, lifts our own mind to another higher level, so to say. It makes sense in that way. And the third teaching Sri Ramakrishna gives is take the name of the Lord, repeat the mantra. Okay, so what's the big deal about that? Again, it is linked to the science of it. So spiritual company can lift your mind from this worldly plane up to some level, to their frequency. Then you suppose you stay there with them for a long time, you've been living in an ashrama 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. Okay, if they're all enlightened people, then you'll become and tune into the enlightened level. Otherwise, whatever the average frequency is there, we have become tuned to that. When you try to lift at that, you'll find that maybe it is, that will drag you down also. And you will see sometimes how you need to outgrow something. So to keep on progressing to higher and higher levels, you need some personal effort and something higher that can lift you to its own level. Okay, where the flow of energy is there. We talked about that we are connected. When two things are connected, then we'll probably not be at the same level. If they're at the same level, there's no flow. To the temperature of two things are same, there's no flow of heat. If the potential of two things are same, there's no flow of electricity. If the water pressure is same, there's no flow of water. When there's a difference, then there's a flow from the higher to the lower. So as it flows, the lower one gets filled up. It is rising to another level, but it has to connect to a source where what will obtain that energy. So deep inside man is the real fountain of our spiritual energy. These are external supports. The community, the ashrama, like-minded people, satsang, and all those things are there. They'll lift you up to a certain level, give a help to rise from the gross entangled state of mind. But beyond that, you have to do your own internal sadhana to lift yourself beyond this world, so to say. And in that place, to facilitate that, Sri Ramakrishna says, the idea of japa and meditation is the means, so to say, your own spiritual sadhana. There's the same science applies to it. So when Sri Ramakrishna says, repeat the mantra, what is so important and interesting about and big deal about this mantra, you might say? Some people think it's simply some word, some om or something. Okay, if I say 5 times, nothing has happened, so maybe, if you tell them some esoteric and mysterious thing like that, if you do this and suddenly your kundalini awaken or your chakras will become purified, and that's what people want, a shortcut. Okay, but they don't want to do the hard work. No one can enter into our own mind and purify it for us. We have to do that part ourselves. If somebody says, here's the means and tools and instruments by which you can do that purification within yourself, that is self-empowerment. You are standing on your own feet. The mantra or this process, the discipline of japa, which is the repetition of the mantra, receiving that power through a proper channel, which is a guru parampara. And that power that mantra is a living mantra. It's called Chaitanya, alert, awakened mantra. How we receive it, how you practice it, and how that mantra can facilitate that taking this rocket from the earth, so to say, where it is held down by the gravity. So you have got this powerful booster rocket, so to say, that can take you beyond the atmosphere and beyond the pull of the gravitation of the earth into outer space, where you totally feel that weightlessness type of thing. So sadhana means availing these things. Japa and meditation are those disciplines to do. So today we'll briefly talk as an introduction a little bit about the power of the mantra, the science of the mantra, and we'll continue this in the next time, but next Sunday. But what I've been trying to do is to give a little bit of a logical, scientific way of understanding this, what we are at all dimensions of our being, and how this world is there. And it's not simply we are isolated, disconnected beings. No, we are deeply entangled, coupled, locked into this system. And that is why when we want to raise our minds to another plane, higher state of consciousness, we find we struggle so much. So what would be the outcome for you to take from today's talk? It will be for you to go back, put these ideas in some drawings, draw the pictures, write your brief notes in there. That's a concept here, the principles here, and then sit back and look around yourself and the environment that you're living in, and try to write down and link what are the things you are linked to and how we are entangled with that. And some of them could be nice entanglements and all those things, positive ones. Some are negative ones that keep us dragging us down there. So having understood that, when you sit down to practice your spiritual disciplines and trying to meditate and you focus your mind on some divine form in your own heart, and suddenly your mind runs after some job or some trip, then you pause and say, what really happened here? Okay, it just simply did not run out, something dragged it out. Here I am trying to entrain it on a spiritual ideal, my chosen ideal, but the pull of this world, whatever it's some person or some responsibility or some duty or some wonderful thing that I like, suddenly drags my mind to another faraway place. I'm simply left here in the body, the mind has gone away somewhere else. What is the mechanism by which it is happening? And if you understand that part of it, then you'll know how to disentangle it. So before sitting in your meditation, you snip all these little ties and say, for this 15-20 minutes, I'm going to insulate myself from this external world, mentally and spiritually. And then with great alertness and focus and concentration, I try to anchor myself to that chosen ideal, whatever aspect of God, whether it's nameless and formless like Brahman, or consciousness, or light, or some particular divine form like Christ or Buddha or Rama or Krishna, Ramakrishna or Durga or Kali, Saraswati. All these are different aspects of that one universal consciousness. But we approach them according to the constitution of our mind, our previous samskaras and our previous spiritual pursuits and all those things. That is how we are naturally constituted, and it helps us to follow that same path. Otherwise, you take up a new idea, then you have to do the whole work again. The spiritual teacher, when he gives this mantra for you, okay, decides for you what is or who is your chosen ideal and what is the mantra. The mantra is not simply some words. Behind the words is power, and we understand power. Many people might not be so aware of that. You say something nice to somebody, say thank you or how nice of you, greet them nicely. That word evokes some nice, wonderful sentiments in the heart of the other person. If you're not careful, you criticize somebody, you are critical or cynical or angry, shout at somebody. You just said a word, but embedded in that word was some energy. And when the other person received it, it created so much restlessness or pain or something like that. It could be a lingering pain. Somebody said something to you 5 years back, and every time you remember that, it brings that to the surface of the mind, and you feel that misery that you experienced long time back. You see, such is the power of the words. Words means it has some energy, and that energy is transmitted through this vehicle of this thing. That is what we are always trying to transmit. Even if you try to hit something with a stone, that means there is some energy in your hand. You transmit that into kinetic energy through a stone or arrow or bullet or something, and it goes and hits somebody. That vehicle, the piece of arrow or whatever was the vehicle only, but the energy came, did the damage or did good to that. So we have to understand at a deeper level how we are interacting with this world. And everything you do bounces back onto you. So we have to be very, very mindful about that. The mantra is a great purifier. Constantly repeating the mantra. Repeating means swinging the pendulum. It hits a particular rhythm. The energy, when it hits the natural rhythm of the mantra, that energy becomes awakened, so to say. The mantra becomes alive. It's called Chaitanya. Now it resonates. And when it begins to resonate with you, that means the energy flows. Energy flows from one system to another only that when the two frequencies are resonating. Okay, how do we know that? I have a violin which is similarly tuned to a second violin, which is kept in the next room or on a table. I play on the first violin. The vibrations that are there travel across the air, and the second violin begins to vibrate. If I put a stop to the sound here, we'll hear that second violin vibrating. The energy from here got transmitted to the second one on the condition. What's the condition? That both of must be tuned to the same frequency. So if we say within us at a deeper level of our being, there is a spiritual entity consciousness, okay, and we'll personify it with the idea of some aspect of God, my chosen ideal, but essentially it is a pulsating energy. It has got its own natural frequency. That energy is embedded and encoded in what is called a mantra, And when that mantra is given to you by the spiritual teacher, and it's not simply it's written or something, he can either tell you in your ear, he might. Sri Ramakrishna would initiate people by just writing something on the tongue. He could even just look at somebody and transmit that power. They have that capacity to make a direct transmission of power. Whatever it is, the person, the disciple receives that. And then he cultivates that, builds on that by infusing his own energy into it. So somebody swings your pendulum a little bit, and what do you do now? You keep on pushing it and maintaining that rhythm until that becomes your rhythm. The moment you hit that resonance, what happens? Just like the energy flowed from one violin to the other, that energy from your higher spiritual self, which is your own chosen ideal, begins to flow down through your mind into body, and you will suddenly feel the effect of that. In the Yoga Sutras, in the Maharishi's Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, when he is trying to prescribe on what we should do meditation on, and one of them is meditate on Ishwara. He gives a definition of this. What is that being Ishwara? The cosmic being, the original teacher, the source of who is omniscient and omnipresent and all that. It means our own higher self. And then he says, so what do I meditate on? I have visualize some particular form, whatever form you choose to be. Tasya vachaka pranava. The vachaka, the sound form of him is pranava. Pranava means omkara. And what do I do with that? Tad japa tadartha bhavanam. Repeat that omkara mantra, contemplating on the meaning, artha bhavanam. But it's not simply the word meaning as an information or knowledge part of it. You are contemplating on the energy that is pulsating out of it at a grosser level, at a subtle level. It is a sort of knowledge that comes out of you. At a grosser level, it might be the sound om that is we hear through our ear. But there is something very fine, deep, as we go deeper and deeper to the source of that omkara. And by repeating that with great concentration and devotion, we begin to resonate with that idea or that energy that is in there. And what is the effect out of it? In the Yoga Sutras, you see this next verse says, if you do that, then all this negative hold of the world that is there, depression, lethargy, anything that drains you out, those things, even disease of the body, fatigue or inertia or something, all those type of things, the whole list is given there. That's where the curing effect begins to happen. And as the mind is lifted up, all this natural weakness and shortcomings and the hold of the grip of the body and the lower worldly ideas on the mind, they begin to loosen up. As it begins to loosen up, the mind naturally begins to lift up like the hot air balloon. We will take up this subject of this, the power and the science of mantras and japa, as they are so important in our spiritual discipline. When you say meditate, you visualize, but the main mantra discipline do is japa. And it should not be considered to be, okay, simply somebody is repeating some mantra. In the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna says there are so many forms of yajnas, sacrifices. Sacrifices are that by which we free ourselves from the impurities of connections of this world and purifies the mind, yajna. And he says, of all the yajnas, yajnanam japo asmi. Of all the various types of yajnas we do, whether we offer material food or knowledge or spiritual things, the highest form of yajna by which the mind is purified is japam, repetition of the mantra. But there's a whole science of it there. And if you understand that whole science of it, then we take this discipline of meditation and japa with great zeal and interest in knowing that how the mechanism works. Otherwise, for those who want to have an understanding and intellectual conviction, to understand, some people need that. Others are people there with very simple faith. Okay, Shraddha is there. The teacher has said that, and I believe that, and I don't need to understand the nitty-gritty, the mechanisms of it. The doctor has given me the medicine. I don't need to know the chemical composition of the antibiotic and all that. I have the faith in him, and I will do what he has asked me to do. Take the medicine 3 times a day, and after 2 days, you begin to feel good, feel the change. After 5 days or 7 days, you are totally cured. Did you understand the chemical composition of the medicine or how it worked inside your body? No, but you had that faith. Other people might ask a few questions to the doctor and say, "Tell me, how does it work?" The doctor might says, "Let me explain you this," and the person now becomes convinced, and then they require a little bit of help of the intellect and understanding to put them in gear to translate those ideas into action. So for such people, these talks are there to give you some intellectual understanding, as much as possible for me, as much as possible for you to understand. But this is only knowledge, ideas. What you need is to translate this into action. The proof of the cake is in eating it. Proof of understanding whether repetition of a mantra and meditation will help you spiritually is for you to practice them. Otherwise, it will help you understand things, make you a good pandit and a philosopher. You can write nice books, give wonderful lectures and all that. But will it make you spiritual? No. So spiritual growth is totally dependent on sadhana. But some intellectual understanding can pave the way up to certain distance. Beyond that, you have to go into the experience of it, not only understanding but anubhuti of it, and that's where you'll come to the final conclusion and experience of the truths that are taught by the scriptures and sages. So we'll discuss this next Sunday, take it further. But in the meantime, I would like you to understand what is this disease of this worldliness that Sri Ramakrishna, in so many ways, how many strings and ropes and chains are anchoring us to this. And if you become aware of that, then you know where to cut and when to cut and how to loosen. So otherwise, no matter how much you put to practice, unless you disconnect yourself, you will not go. That is why Sri Ramakrishna say, renunciation, and the Upanishads say, tyagena eka amritatvam ashnute. This state of immortality, the Atman, can only be attained through renunciation. Renunciation means mentally, spiritually disconnecting ourselves from this lower pull of the world. That's the indispensable prerequisite, but let's try to understand that in a very scientific and logical way. Om asato ma satkamaya tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityorma amritam gamaya. Om shanti shanti shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.